This is Penn Woods interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends, and this is November the 4th, 1977, and we're in Wewoka, Oklahoma at the First Methodist Church, and I'm visiting with Mrs. Margaret Jane Norman. I believe that's Ed Norman. What is it, Edward what?
Edgar Franklin Norman.
Edgar Franklin Norman. Ms. Norman is a businesswoman in Oklahoma City as well as a civic leader, and the two things that I know there are a lot of things we could talk with about her, but the two that I am most interested in talking about are two things in which she played certainly played the leading role, single leading role, although many people were involved, as the interview will show. And this is the building of the Seminole Nation Museum in Wewoka and the bicentennial program of Wewoka. And I would like to start off with the story of the Seminole Nation Museum as to how this idea came about, who conceived the idea, and a little bit about how it developed. And we'll just let you talk. I may break in and ask questions, or it may not, just as things go.
Well, there's so many people involved in the founding of the museum, I hardly know where to begin. I will note that years ago when I taught school in Wewoka, in some of my English classes, we had a great mixture of blacks and Indians, and none of them seemed to know anything about their heritage. I remember one time they were to write letters to pen pals in other places in the United States. And every single one of the children responded by saying, "We don't have anything here. We don't know what to tell them. What can we tell them? This is a little bitty town." I tried to remind them that Wewoka has a heritage that is peculiar only to Wewoka. It is the capital of the Seminole Nation Museum. Seminole Nation. And I told them, I said, here you are in junior high. You have the grandson of a former chief as your principal in junior high. You have the daughter of a creek chief as your history teacher. The names of our town itself is unusual: Mekasuka, Yochiza, Hitchta. Now this is something that you should publicize and let people know you have something to be proud of. Well, in 1966, Wewoka celebrated its 100th anniversary, and at that time they decided that they would present a pageant on the history of Wewoka, and all the proceeds would go toward establishing a museum. For one solid week in 1966, the town celebrated. They put on a perfectly beautiful pageant that was written by local citizens, and over 500 people participated. The profit from that amounted to about $10,000, and it was to be used to establish the Seminole Nation Museum.
What was the total crowd, do you know?
I think they averaged every night at least 2,000 or 3,000 at the pageant.
Did you get quite a few from out there?
Yes, after the first night's production, they came from everywhere. It was done very professionally. Of course, we had professional help in directing it. And now T.G. Headley, who was a very philanthropic, civic-minded leader, was the one that instigated. And then Mrs. Fred Cochran, Mr. Headley had a heart attack, and so Mrs. Cochran went ahead with the plans, and she was chairman of most of the arrangements for that centennial.
Did is Headley live?
Mr. Headley only died just recently.
You mentioned your grandson of a Seminole chief, and your name.
Well, T.B. Miller, Tuskahoma B. Miller, was principal of junior high for years, and then Louise Shanantona, Mrs. Bat Shanantona, who is Creek. I think it was her father or grandfather that was a Creek chief. And she taught Oklahoma history.
She died about 2 weeks ago.
Yes, just recently. And so we had that $10,000, but nothing happened. And 10 years passed. It was not quite 10 years, about in 1972 or 3, I was visiting with Mr. Headley. And I told him that what were we going to do about the museum. And he said, well, it just needs somebody to get it started, and he wasn't able. It didn't seem like we were going to do anything, so we made plans and got permission to put in a mini museum in our Wewoka library. American Association of University Women bought showcases, and we put that in just to see what response we got from the local people by having this mini museum. At the end of a year, we'd had 1,200 people, just local people, that seemed interested and had signed in at the mini museum. Then I went back to Mr. Headley and some of the people that I knew who were interested in the beginning, and I said, look, I think we've got enough interest in this town now to do something about it. Well, it was a long hassle. Where were we going to do it? We first planned to build a wing on the library. We found that we couldn't afford that. So then we had this perfectly beautiful rock building that was our community center for years, and is also used as an American Legion meeting place. And the government had given us a loan to build a new civic center. So the time, I believe there's a time for everything, and this time was right. The city and the American Legion agreed to relinquish what has been the community building to us as a building for the museum. We knew nothing at all how to establish it. Someone said the best thing to do is to go to the museum meetings throughout the state when they had them, and to form a historical society. We went at things sort of backwards. But in 1973, we had our first meeting of our historical society, and we started selling memberships. The first year, we had 600 people that were a member of our historical society. And we got the interest up, and that's actually the way we raised our first money. We got, every civic club, every organization almost was 100% membership. And we had such cooperation, it was almost unbelievable. Someone's told me that they couldn't do this except in a small town. And perhaps that's right, because we know lots of people, and we know who can do this and who can do that. After our initial historical society meeting, and we elected officers, they elected me as president of the historical society and got a good group of working people to assist. We appointed committees somewhat like they have with the Oklahoma Heritage Association. Everybody had a job to do. And that was in May 1973. And when we opened the museum on November 2nd, 1974, we